Hi guys, it's Kate, and I think we should create something today. Thanks so much for coming to my channel. And as you can see, I am busily cutting out a vintage postcard. I really love old vintage postcards, and this one was mailed, I want to say around 1906. And I found it in my collection and decided to scan it in and print it out on my inkjet so I could use it in collage. So I just cut out the little boy holding the moon, and I'm trying to decide whether or not it would be better as portrait or landscape. And I'll tell you, sometimes it's hard, but this time we're going with portrait. I have to say, collage has been something pretty fun to get involved in. I love using paper as another medium to create something that I think is beautiful. And even if I create something some days that's not beautiful, at least to me, it gives me something to learn from, and it really breaks up that white page feeling where you just don't really know what to do. So I love using different kinds of paper and materials for my collages and painting and just about anything else I can get my hands on. I seem to collect supplies like they're going out of style, whether they're professional or, from the Dollar Tree. And I have to say, these papers that I'll be using, I got from the Dollar Tree and I just love them. They're so easy to cut or tear and put down on paper. They have tons of different colors and textures, and some of the paper quality, I was just really impressed with the variety and different sizes. So you'll see me grab a couple here, and honestly, in videos that are going to be coming up. I love the little boy holding the moon. There's just something great about having that illustrative style with the different primary colors put in there. And it's amazing how something over 100 years old can be so well preserved. It's pretty awesome when you can find treasures like this. And I got to keep the real thing and use it in art. And one of the nice things about using some of these older items is a lot of times they're out of copyright protection. So they're okay to use, especially if you're working on personal projects like I am here. So you can see the polka dot paper that I just used. That is a Dollar Tree special. And so is that pink piece of paper with the great pattern on it, and a couple other pieces that I'll use in this project. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it's so hard to figure out where you want everything to go. I don't know if it's analysis paralysis or you're just afraid of putting down that glue and not knowing exactly if it's going to be what you want it to be. But one of the nice things is you can always do it again. And I like to joke with my partner here at home that, boy, you could paint a sunset every night and it would always be different. And it's really true. You see sunsets every day and they're so easy to take for granted, but they're always just a little bit different. And they're different 10 minutes after you look. So I like to say that you can always do it over again. And that's how we get better, isn't it? So I'm almost done laying things out, and I'm getting ready to paste using some matte medium Liquitex brand, and I really love it. It's easy to brush on. It's great to use for different things. I like to use it for glazes too, and so I'll just brush it on here, and I really go over it to get it to stick with the paper with the Catalyst wedge. I love that tool for spreading paint, spreading liquid medium, gessos, all of that stuff. And it really gets that paper attached firmly, gets out excess medium that I can use for other pieces of collage on the paper. Now, even though I laid everything out so carefully, just the way I wanted it, it's going to probably end up looking just a little bit different because it's hard to remember. I did see a tip online though that I really loved. I don't know why I didn't think of it before, but that is if you're doing a collage and you lay it out, take a picture. And it seems so simple. So I'm trying to remember to do that more. So you can see I'm still using the wedge to kind of get that on there. Some of the paper from the Dollar Tree lots is pretty thick, so it just takes a little bit extra to get it to stick. I don't have any of the thicker medium right now, so I just had to use what I had on hand. But it works like a charm, and I can tell you today it's still stuck on there pretty well. I love having supplies that I don't have to be precious about. I'm using some cheap watercolor paper, which works just fine as long as you flatten it after it dries. I use the cheap brushes. I love using cheap stuff. And it makes it easier to try new things and be more courageous with experimentation. I've been kind of playing around with paints and different crafts and hobbies for a few years, but I seem to be kind of dipping my toes in slowly. And for a while, it just felt like I was collecting supplies and not really doing anything with them. And I've invested in some nice things too, but sometimes they just become so precious and hard to use. But part of the joy is supposed to be to use them and enjoy them and make something that you think is beautiful. So I'm trying to get more into that now, and I think having this YouTube channel is really gonna help with that also. I get to share this with the community and even, as basic of something that I'm doing, maybe it'll help somebody or give somebody an idea, and then we can all learn from each other. You'll see by the smallest little scraps I use, I really just don't want anything to go to waste. You can see that some of my paper is buckling a little bit around where I have the medium, and it really goes away after I let it dry and put a couple of books on it and let it dry flat. And I'm doing a flat piece of paper. It's a 9 by 12 from a really inexpensive watercolor paper book. And I had collected tons of different kinds of watercolor paper just to try them out. You always hear about how paper really is everything. And I have to say, it's true. It's I've tried the Arches paper and I've tried, different kinds of inexpensive papers. This one, I don't remember the brand, but I think it probably cost me under $5 for a book. So it was definitely on special. But it really works with experimentation, and I think that the more inexpensive watercolor paper works really well for mixed media. It might not, allow watercolor to spread as much and really get the nice blends that you get with better paper, but it works really well for collage and mixed media. Maybe better than mixed media paper, which I have too, and I really love using. And again, I'm speeding up a little bit through some of these things, but let me know what you prefer to watch. I like having these conversations and I do the voiceover after I finish my project so that I can talk a little bit about it. But I don't want to make something too long and just have you sitting there watching me glue down pieces of paper. So here you can see I've let the main collage dry. So now I am ready to attach the little boy and the sentiment. And so got my matte medium back out and ready to go. So I'll be putting him on there. Now, one thing I try to be careful of, and you'll see it in the video here, is that when you print something out with an inkjet printer, the ink can smear afterward. It's a little bit different than something that's laser printed because you have toner that kind of almost like melts on the page like plastic. But with inkjet, you can definitely get some smears by getting the paper wet. So I try to be extra careful with my brush and getting around that. But first, I'll be putting on some gesso to knock back some of the colors and just make it a little bit more cohesive. And I'm using Liquitex Basics acrylic gesso. And I really love the consistency. It's not, too opaque, not too transparent. As it spreads nicely. I don't have to use very much. And right now I'm just dry brushing it a little bit. And you can really see that vintage look kind of coming through too. I love the old colors on the postcard scans, and it's all original, I guess patina, you could call it. So that's real aged there. I can't recreate that very easily, but that's why I love it so much. And it's just such a joy to be able to revisit artwork that someone else did so long ago. And so many things change over that time, and things are digital and seem to be so easy to produce. And it's just hard to imagine that somebody so long ago was sitting at a desk and creating something by hand. I like to think about Norman Rockwell sometimes making those images for the Saturday Evening Post. And just what a wonderful artist he was, especially since it probably took so much time to produce those. It's just amazing work. So I was trying to do a little bit of the collage, like separating out the pink and the green paper a little bit in the center there to frame him a bit and kind of make him seem like he's reaching up toward the sky. And the sky is a little bit of the collage. And you can see me kind of going careful around the edges with my brush. And I do get a little bit of smears when I do this, but I really don't mind it, especially on something that is looking pretty vintage anyway. It's just sort of expected to happen. But I don't want to disrupt too much of that brightness in the moon. And just going around it ever so easily with the brush, just very lightly with the matte medium to get it all nice and sealed in. And then I'll do the same with the sentiment as well. And I post that just a little bit above where he is. And that's actually not too far from what the original card looked like. It was sort of above him in the sky. So I stayed a little bit truer to that. And just slightly dabbing it a bit to get a couple of little air bubbles out with the Catalyst wedge. Which, by the way, I have a silicone spatula that I use just as much. I don't know if anybody shops at Walmart. I do whatever seems to be most reasonable these days, and I definitely do couponing when I can because, well, we all know how high these prices have gotten over the past couple of years. But every now and then when you pick up a order at Walmart, when you do the order online and pick up at the store, sometimes they have samples that they give out. And so one day I went in and they included this mini spatula. I think it's going to make several appearances in upcoming videos. I just love that thing. I immediately brought it home and put it with my paint sets. So you'll see me off to the side, mixing up a little bit of burnt umber with matte medium to create a glaze. I really wanted to add some extra texture and color to this collage so that the little boy doesn't stand out quite so much with his moon against the background, and also give him a little something to hang on to so he's not just floating in the middle of the page. So I created a bit of ground here and I wanted to make it very transparent so you can still see the texture from the collage paper in the back and see some of that great design from the original postcard. So I mixed just a tiny bit of burnt umber acrylic paint with some matte medium over to the side there, and I'm just carefully doing it right below his feet. And I liked the effect of the glazing so much that actually I grabbed some of a little bit of a neutral purple or violet. It's called Violet Gray from a 12 Shades of Gray collection that I got online, and I can post a link below, but I mix that with a little bit of matte medium too and kind of turn that a bit into the night sky. And you can see there on my brush, I really have just a little bit that I'm mixing in just on the corner of my brush. And I add I think a touch more as I'm mixing it up, but it's just enough to make a glaze. And I really, really love glazing on paper. I think it just adds so much, and you can still see detail, and you can layer it, and it's great to do. Another hint too with glazing is if you have colors that don't seem to work very well together on a page, it's a great way to make it cohesive. It kind of acts like a color where if you're blending your own paint colors, if you use the mother color and put a little bit or a lot of it in all of the colors that you mix, they will look more cohesive and they'll, look more attractive on your paper or canvas. So glazing achieves a similar effect. And so if you glaze with it, it will unite colors on your page as well. So if something ever seems off, try a glaze. I'm going carefully around the words. I don't want to glaze over the the boy with the moon. I want to make sure that he still comes out from the page, so I don't want to cover him up at all. So I'm just going carefully around the edges and then going to the edge of the page. And I also bring a little bit of that violet into the bottom part of the paper in a minute too, just to add some extra detail and to really unite that with the burnt umber as well. Maybe I'll have to make a video on 10 or 15 different ways to use glaze. It's one of my favorites. So I'm going to be dabbing just a little bit if I get it on the boy in the moon. And I'm just really finishing it up around the edges with the detail. I'm just checking it over and making sure I didn't miss anything. And then this is where I'll add a little bit to the bottom. And I wanted to add a little bit more of the violet to have some darkness under his feet, maybe add a little bit of shadows and a little bit more texture to the ground so it stands out from the sky a bit. I think it adds a little bit of nice balance to the page too. And so I'm going to let that dry and then come back to it and then add some details. So I've got this little, I guess it's like a stylus, but I got it at the Dollar Tree and I dip it right into the paint. And I'm going to add some stars with that to get some more contrast into the picture. I really don't have any whites for highlights, so it'll just add that extra little bit. Oftentimes, if you're working on a project, if you think it's just missing something, try adding some white. It just makes things really pop. It's kind of incredible. I just really love the look of the contrast with black and white on a page. along with the colors that you're using. It just adds so much detail, and stars add some extra texture too, and really lets you know even more that yes, that's a sky in the background. And he's really hanging on to that moon for dear life, and he's going to get it for that person for sure. So I'm going over the sentiment there that was on the postcard with my black fine liner. And I believe I got that one on Amazon as part of a set, and it's pretty inexpensive. Now, one thing I will say is that you have to be careful with some of the stuff you buy on there when it says something in the description and it's really not so. So you have some inks that as soon as they dry, they're permanent, and if you add moisture or water, they will not smear or move. This one definitely moves, although not too easily, so that was a relief. So I'm just lightly going around a few parts of the outline, almost like making shadows, and I'm adding a little bit of black marks to the bottom ground area also, just to add that little extra detail, a little bit of a sharper edge. And honestly, it's relaxing too, so it's hard to know when to stop doing that because knowing what to do is maybe not as important as knowing when to stop and when you're done, because you can get carried away pretty easily. At least I can. And I'm just kind of eyeing it, seeing where else I can add some detail because I think it's almost done, but not quite done. So I went back to the white and I grabbed a jelly roll. So I have my little dots for the stars, but I decided to make a couple of little starlight shapes as well so that there'd be a little bit of contrast with the stars and they wouldn't all just be little dots. And I like the jelly rolls. They really the ink comes out easily and it writes really nicely. The only thing that disappoints me a little bit is it's not quite as opaque as you hope for unless you get a lot of ink out on the page. But if you go over it a little bit extra, it'll come out. I know some people use paint pens and other things, and I actually have a few to try because I started out with the jelly roll and then I got some paint pens and they're the kind that you shake up and you squeeze the tip and I don't know if they're all like that. That's kind of a new thing for me. And I remember shaking one and the tip flew right out of the marker. So I can't recommend that one. I wish I remembered what brand it was so I could actually say, "Hey, the tip comes out of those." But the Telly Roll's never given me any issues. And I do have some new ones to try, so I should be posting a video about that pretty soon, so you'll have to check. I really hope that you've enjoyed this. I have to say, learning my way around a little bit still, but this video has been so much fun to make. And, just sitting at my desk with the little recording set up and being able to just enjoy art, and it gives me a reason to come do it more often. So many things get in the way. So, I really appreciate you spending time with me today, and hopefully, this might give you a couple of ideas, or you were able to craft along with me and make something beautiful of your own. So, until the next video, keep creating.